The latest. Thank you for your love and support. I appreciate you. On Nairobi is on edge. Just hours ago, one of Africa's most brilliant legal minds, Brian Kagoro, was escorted to Jomo Kenyatta International Airport and deported. The charge, a foreign-funded plot to overthrow the government through mass protest. The Kenyan state says he is a threat to national security. His supporters say he is being silenced for telling the truth. Today, we pull back the curtain on the man, the money, the alleged coup by protests. To understand why Kenya is terrified of Brian Kagoro, you have to understand who he is. Born into the struggle for liberation in Zimbabwe, Kagoro has spent his life fighting for constitutional rights. In the 1990s, he was a young lawyer in Zimbabwe, taking on Robert Mugabe's regime. He helped fund the Crisis in Zimbabwe Coalition and the independence radio station Voice of the People, which was later bombed by unknown assailants. He isn't just a lawyer, he is a Pan-Africanist powerhouse who has lectured at the UN, the AU, and most recently delivered a viral speech at the G20, telling the West that Africa will no longer kneel. For 20 years, he has been an intellectual anchor in Nairobi, working with the Open Society Foundation to advance democratic freedom across East Africa. Kenyan security officials claim they have been tracking Kagoro for 6 months, the Coup claim. The government alleges Kagoro was the bridge between international donors and local activists. They claim he promised to raise $1.2 million to fund renewed street protests. Officials point to his presence in encrypted WhatsApp groups and several closed-door strategy sessions in Nairobi. They are framing him as the hidden hand behind the Gen Z spirit, claiming he was using philanthropy as a cover for political interference. A man who carries a burning coal in his hand doesn't need to tell people it is hot. The state believes Kagoro's idea was the fuel and the protests were the fire. The deportation of Kagoro follows a pattern we have seen throughout 2024 and 2025. Whenever the Kenyan youth rise against the cost of living or corruption, the government blames foreign funding.
When my parents were fighting for the liberation of my country, they were called terrorists. And I'm always mindful when it comes to this naming and labeling, that we don't end up in an overly simplistic concept of everything being terrorism. The greatest terror caused in our country is often by elites in the bureaucracy in government who get into cahoots with foreign interests and are willing to sell their children, great-grandchildren, and grandmothers in exchange for expensive cars, for investments overseas, for little shiny trinket, never factories that produce, never productive economy sectors, but trinkets that distinguish them as natives who did not transcend into understanding economy. I wish to call this what it is. It's not just greed. It's a splendid display of foolishness. It has now been discovered that the African gene, or the black gene, possesses a lot of solutions to both current and future global health challenges. So there is a contest over our genes. And we are sitting here, when we ask us where do we invest, we want to build a new parliament building with more seats. We want, come on, people. We can blame colonialism for many things, but I think we need to inspect our own heads. We have high unemployment rates, low productivity rates. We export unbeneficiated goods. We now have accentuated challenges related to poverty and inequality that are dramatized by others who want to exploit us some more. And we, faced with this moment, critical moment of leadership, are asked to decide what is important. And what is important is better cars, better buildings. Colonialism left us with weak institutions, with poor infrastructure, fragmented and divided society, and ideologies of divisionism. Colonialism called it divide and conquer. But in the immediate post-independence, it's divide, loot, divide, decimate, divide, extract, divide, and aid. You create a cyclical dependency, intellectual dependency, economic dependency, political dependency, security dependency. So that when you want to do your own security, you have to go external. When you want to do your own economy, you have to go external. When you want to do your own science, you have to go external. When you want to produce data, you have to go external. I am a very proud African, as you know. I have spent the last 30 years preaching Pan-Africanism. What is Pan-Africanism without capacity to produce own liberation? What is Pan-Africanism without the capacity to think for yourself? We talk a lot. We talk a lot. There is a proverb in Uganda that says, if you make an agreement with a lion to become vegetarian, be rest assured you are the first vegetable the lion will eat. The sovereign will of people who've been oppressed consistently under chattel enslavement, oppressed under colonialism, oppressed under apartheid, and now seek liberation. No one can tell you not to be free. No one can tell you what words to use for freedom. I want to leave you with this anecdote. Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela was called a terrorist for daring to say the system that made his people subhuman was unacceptable. What will your generation say? Will you worry about the names that you are called, or will you look at the higher price, which is there is no liberation that happens by permission. There needs to be more than outrage, a commitment to implement what comes out of Johannesburg.
Our African leaders and citizens constantly confirm the European caricature, an object of pity. When we come into these spaces, we can never transact revolution in courtesy. I like to be civil, to be courteous, right? But each time I start pointing to atrocities committed by African governments, the Europeans and the Americans cheer me up. Each time I refer to the historical atrocities and continuing atrocities committed first by governments and by companies that are dumping cyanide into our underground water and nuclear waste, right? You know what it is said? This is retrogressive. It's undermining investment. It's again, listen, we cannot win the narrative battle by arguing in pockets. They are happy us talking about our localized, indigenized oppression. They are never happy us talking about the question of distribution and redistribution, of the global economy, of global power. And what Nkrumah and others realized in 1963 at the founding conference, if Africa is not represented, if Africa does not own its narrative, but you can't own your narrative if your leadership is totally disconnected from its people. You can't own your narrative if your intellectuals are totally disconnected. We have underinvested in rural areas and slums where the majority of our people are. In fact, we treat them as security threats and they are over-policed. Number two, we have underinvested in our academic and research institutions. We'd rather bring McKinsey and bring Deloitte and Touch. They will help us do AU reform. Why? Because there are no African consultancies that we know. Even if they exist, we have no relationship with them to help us with AU reforms, with anything else. And this is not a pronouncement on McKinsey or Deloitte. It's a pronouncement on ourselves. We have not, as a leadership, begun to recognize that the native is capable of knowledge. The native is capable of economy. The native is capable of invention. You can't change the narrative if the starting premise is we're trying to be like Europe and to catch up. We can't change the narrative when we're constantly trying to learn from others without understanding, and I'll end with that, what William Tunga said, the former Chief Justice of Kenya. He says, let's not engage in this romanticist view that there can only be one way to learn. We first must indigenize knowledge. That's what I said. Learn from our culture and traditions. Number two, we must diversify who we learn from. We can not only learn from the West. We need to learn from everybody who has something to teach. Number three, we must domesticate what we learn. If we're going to learn anything, let's domesticate. I think the chairperson and the minister said it's consciousness. Narrative is first and foremost by realizing self-worth, self-belief, and looking inward, so that when you look outward, it is to supplement not a vacuous state of nothingness and inferiority, but it is to supplement a very stable, solid foundation where your culture, where your values, where your value for people is important.
By deporting Kagoro, the state is sending a message to all civil society groups. We are watching your bank accounts. They are trying to link the fight for bread and justice to foreign plots, to delegitimize the government. It's ironic that a man who has spent his career preaching against Western aid and for African self-reliance is being accused of being a Western puppet. But in the world of political survival, facts often take a backseat to fear. Amazing. Our leaders will never cease to amaze us. They always try to find one way or the other. When they are doing things wrong, that they need to take responsibility for their actions, that is the time you see our leaders pointing fingers at other people. And if you, the government, you think you have been doing the right thing in the interest of the people, why are you scared? We all saw the protests that happened, the Jay-Z protest, taxing bread, sanitary pad, phones, like the things that the IMF asked the Kenyan government to tax the people was too much, to the point that IMF came out to apologize to the people of Kenya. And we still have our leaders in Africa sitting down, pointing fingers at people, that they are the reason to which people are rising. When things are difficult, we don't need you, the people in power, to tell us that things are expensive and the country is becoming a place that is unbearable. We go to the market, we eat, we buy things. So we are able to tell when things are okay and when things are not. If they are telling us that this man that has been preaching against Western whatever in Africa is actually taking money from the same people to destabilize Kenya, then I wonder. So it is our right to also protest, to tell you that things are wrong. Protests will come if things are going wrong in Kenya. The Kenyans will definitely rise up and protest. They cannot continue to be silent over things that they think are wrong. What do you think about this news that is coming from Kenya? We are the only ones that can set ourselves free. United we stand, divided we fall. And united we keep standing forever and ever. The greatest enemy of the African is mental slavery. So let's decolonize ourselves from mental slavery. Let's keep sharing to educate our brothers and sisters. Together we'll make Africa great for ourselves and the next generations that are going to come. So that's the latest around the world in Africa, East Africa, and in Kenya.